Good morning and welcome to this regular weekly meeting of the Lincoln County Board of Commissioners. It is 10 o'clock on Wednesday morning, October 19th, 2022. All three commissioners are present. That constitutes a quorum. First up, we have a resolution proclaiming the Great Annual Shakeout 2022. And yep, our presenters coming up. I will read the resolution. Whereas the County of Lincoln recognizes that no community is immune from natural hazards, whether it be earthquake, wildfire, flood, winter storms, drought, heat wave, or dam failure, and recognizes the importance in enhancing its ability to withstand natural hazards, as well as the importance of reducing the human suffering, property damage, interruption of public services, and economic losses caused by those hazards. And whereas major earthquakes pose a particular significant and ongoing threat to the entire county region, and whereas the county has a responsibility to promote earthquake preparedness internally, as well as with the public, and plan appropriately for earthquake-related disasters, and whereas the protection of county employees will allow them to facilitate the continuity of government and assist the public following a major earthquake event. And whereas community resiliency to earthquakes and other disasters depends on the preparedness levels of all stakeholders in the community, individuals, families, schools, community organizations, faith-based organizations, nonprofits, businesses, and government. Whereas by participating in the Great Oregon Shakeout on October 20th, 2022, hey, that's tomorrow, the County of Lincoln has the opportunity to join and support all Oregonians in strengthening community and regional resiliency. And whereas by supporting the Great Oregon Shakeout, the County of Lincoln can utilize the information on www.shakeout.org/Oregon to educate its residents regarding actions to protect life and property, including mitigating structural and non-structural hazards and participating in earthquake drills. Whereas by registering at www.shakeout.org/Oregon, county employees can participate in the Shakeout drop, cover, and hold on earthquake drill on the 20th at 10:20 a.m. and encourage the public schools, businesses, and other community stakeholders to also register. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the County of Lincoln hereby approves participating in the Great Oregon Shakeout hereto by taking time to recognize and acknowledge the importance of preparing our county for the purposes of building a safer community and reducing the loss of lives and property from a major earthquake event by taking proactive steps today.
Great job. Thank you for reading all of that.
Oh, you're welcome. And the floor is yours, Director. And if you would introduce yourselves.
Sure. So Jenny Damaris, I'm your County Emergency Manager, and it's always a pleasure to come before you to talk about what we do to help our community be more resilient and ready. I come before you every year for the Great Oregon Shakeout, and as you can see by the additional information I've provided for you, we try and track the number of participants that we have from year to year. I would say it's a pretty stable number of community members that participate. We try to reach out more and encourage people. The one thing I would want to celebrate is our city and tribal partners, with them providing the funds in order for them to have their full-time emergency managers. That is really augmenting all of our programs to support our communities here in Lincoln County. So Newport, Lincoln City, and our Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians all have their full-time positions in place, and that really does help promote this across the board. So it's not just us as the county, it really is that whole community approach. So not much more to add to that other than just giving you a little bit of information to talk about our preparedness and outreach efforts that we've been doing since I've been in this position. We continue to track that and just show how we're making progress in trying to reach your community members. So I'd be happy to entertain any questions you have. And of course, encourage the county departments and employees to participate tomorrow morning and take pictures when you're in your department and then send them to us at Emergency Management, and we'll be happy to share them.
Great. Questions, comments from my colleagues?
No questions. I'll just make a couple of comments. Number one, this kind of reminds me of my days in grade school when the fire alarm would ring and we'd all get in a line and hold hands back then. And exit the building. And of course, the whole idea behind it was that practice and training helps be more effective and avoid more serious losses or damages in the event an actual fire drill occurred. And I think, of course, the same applies to this shakeout event and activity. It is really practice and preparedness, as the resolution clearly points out. And one of the things I think that's also important to mention when you talk about preparedness is go bags. I have one in my car. I have one in my office. My kids have them in their cars. My wife has one in her car. So I think that's another important way that we can be prepared because there will be an earthquake. It's just a question of when. So thank you.
And the kids' Christmas is it's only a certain number of days before Christmas. So that's a perfect Christmas gift, are the go bags.
I would
I
agree.
don't know that would go over very well.
Maybe not the kids, not the kids.
I appreciate your enthusiasm, Jenny. I'm just thinking, I don't know that would go over well.
I guess it depends on the age of the recipient.
There you go. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I really think we ought to be celebrating the numbers in this one pager that you provided us,
Yeah.
that over the last decade, you've done 351 Cascadia presentations attended by 13,222 people. That's very impressive.
Thank you. I'm very empowered to
Mhm.
do this job on your behalf.
Well, it's appreciated. And I think it just underscores, like so many other important community issues, the job of education is constant. It never ends. New people are always coming into the community. Children are growing into adults, but that is a significant number, and I thank you for your efforts there.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great day.
Okay, we'll make this official. If somebody would make a motion, please.
I make a motion and proclaiming intent to participate in the Great Oregon Shakeout and work toward becoming a safer community.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Hi.
Aye. All right, we move on to the adoption of the consent calendar. These are routine items and or items that have been discussed at previous meetings. Is there anything that staff or commissioners would like to either highlight or remove for separate consideration?
I'll move for approval of the consent calendar as presented.
Excuse me. I will second the motion.
Gesundheit.
Yes. Motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. All in favor, please say aye.
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 And again,
Thank you.
All right, we don't have a public hearing. We do have one decision action item today, 4-H barn contract, and that will be presented by County Administrator Tim Johnson. Mr. Johnson. And looks like Jack Whaley, our Facilities Director, is joining us as well.
Chair, Commissioners, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm joined by our amazing Facilities Manager, Jack Whaley. Earlier this year, we came before you. As you might have recalled, one of the most interesting grant applications we have ever had before us. We received a phone call from Business Oregon saying that they had $277,000 available for a project on our fairgrounds. I remember huddling individually with each one of you, talking about what your interests were, where we could do. I remember Commissioner Jacobson calling Jack.
Call
and
Jack,
saying,
yes.
Jack, what could we do? Jack was quick to respond to all of you and said, let's look at the 4-H barn. You all voted in support of the $277,000 grant, and Jack began his magic and began a bid process. We now have that bid in front of you. And it is baffling for me, but it leads to the magic that Jack has provided to this county. The bid is far below what we had allocated on this. And $238,000 roughly. And so that means that as we work forward with this, barring any change that may occur in a work order, we will be back at you at some later date and time to discuss what you would like to do with the remaining portion of the funding as it pertains to this.
Almost $40,000 should be able to accomplish something worthwhile with that.
So Jack has the contract here in front of that before us here today. And if you have any questions of us, our recommendation is to accept this bid, the low bid that was provided to us.
So I notice in the contract, the contractor says they will start work this month and expect to have the project completed by December 31st. That's exciting. A great, that we don't have to wait, that get this going right away.
It's important that we get started as soon as possible. Prices of metal is increasing daily.
Mhm.
So the sooner that we can get this passed and get him on job site, the better.
Yeah, and that's why the urgency in bringing this to us for action today, the metal price primarily.
Yes.
Okay, Commissioner Jacobson.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm shocked that we had a bid that came under. You just
Yeah.
don't see that right now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't have any questions really. I'm happy to, move forward, that the work can be done. And then hopefully that building would be ready to be used, for spring when a lot of activity typically takes place in there. And my only other comment was just after that work is done and we, get through it, depending on what we actually have left. I think it might be a nice exercise to reach to the 4-H Leaders Association and 4-H Kids and see if maybe they have my ideas as well. That would be a good group to ask. Yeah.
Excellent. Commissioner Hunt, anything?
Well, I think I am comfortable with this bid, but I think it would be appropriate to ask, since it came in below what we expected, and we all recognize the rapidly increasing costs of construction. Have we vetted this bid and the contractor to assure that they'll be able to complete the project at that cost and up to the quality that we would require?
The contractor was the same contractor that provided the courthouse roof. Was it last year now, I believe?
Sounds right.
Yeah, their work was wonderful, and that came in under bid as well. They're a small outfit. They're not tied to any large corporations, so they have the latitude to move around that way. I've got several other offers. All of them rescinded their offers once the prices started moving. So he has committed to it, and the sooner we get going, the better.
Okay.
Excellent.
We've used them before and they've been exemplary. So
Okay.
So
Good information. Thank you.
something else I think the public ought to understand here, and please, Mr. Whaley, correct me if I'm wrong, that when this work is done, it's essentially going to be a brand new building. It sounds like we're keeping the supports, but everything else is going to be brand new,
yes,
correct?
all the cladding will be new, all the
Mhm.
underlayment will be new. The only thing that's staying is the electrical and the main supports, and then they are going to finish pouring the slab on the inside, so that will improve its usability tremendously. Right now, it's a dirt floor,
Mhm.
and that will all be concrete slab.
Well, this is quite exciting. We're moving closer to finally getting our Commons master plan implemented, but I hope people will see that something significant is happening on the grounds right now, and it's just the first of many things to come. Are we ready for a motion, please?
I'll move to approve the order for time and materials for the 4-H barn contract.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It is approved. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We move on now to the first of two discussion and information items. And the first, sole source procurement of precast concrete arch for Cougar Creek project. Mr. Kenyon. Welcome. If the three of you could introduce yourselves for the audience and for the record.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Roy Kenyon, Lincoln County Public Works Director.
Yes, good morning. I'm Andrew Blair, engineering.
And Brian Gardner, Assistant County Counsel.
All right, the floor is yours.
What we bring to you today is a request to approve for a single source procurement. It's similar to what we did with you like a month and a half ago with the heating system in the courthouse. We have a unique situation where in April, you approved an IGA, intergovernmental agreement with Mid-Coast Watershed Council for us to partner with them for a culvert replacement project on Buck Creek Road, which is basically a 5 rivers drainage. And as part of that agreement, Mid-Coast Watershed Council agreed to basically bring on an engineer for a design and to pay for a majority of that cost. Well, through the process, the engineer basically spec'd out a precast concrete arch, which is a large concrete structure that it's kind of like building a culvert with Legos, and it all kind of sets in place if everything is done right. And there's a lot of specs surrounding that. Well, the engineer spec'd out a specific, basically, provider of this precast concrete arch, which kind of gets us into that sole source procurement. And basically we're asking for permission to go ahead and use that as sole source. Now, Andrew and I have talked about it, and if we get your blessing to go forward, we will go ahead and advertise this sole source so that gives somebody out there an opportunity to protest the sole source. So it basically is a double check on basically that it is true as a sole source procurement. And so that is, so we do have a backup to ensure that what we're telling you today is actually true. Now, if there is a protest and it comes out that they can provide this exact same specified precast concrete arch, then we'll go into our normal basically bid and award process. But if somebody does not protest, then we would go ahead with the sole source procurement.
Okay. And Mr. Gardner, I assume you have vetted this from a legal standpoint?
I have. I wanted to wait to see if you had any other
Okay.
questions, Mr.
Oh,
Kenyon,
okay.
with regards to why this. So some of the findings that 'cause I'm going to suggest written findings from the board
Mhm,
with regards to why this qualifies as a sole source.
mhm.
So if you have more questions for Mr. Kenyon, I would suggest some of those things to consider would be not just that this is, I won't say unique,
Mhm.
but it's very specialized
Mhm.
structure. Mr. Kenyon can go over the exact, and he knows the exact weight, size, dimensions, things that make this a very difficult thing to say transport over long distance. So could be sole source consideration that, yeah, somebody else makes this, say in New Jersey, but to deliver and put this where we need it, we do only have this source for us cost bet. I mean, no one's gonna be able to transport this amount of weight of concrete and size very far. So that'd be a consideration. And that has to be the cost of placing it as well. So, but what from a legal standpoint, what I would suggest for the notice is that to present the board with some written findings based on what Mr. Kenyon's and his department's provided for why this qualifies as sole source. I'll have that developed, so you guys can consider that, see if it meets with your findings. We do the notice for 7 days, and have it specific as to, they can do a protest. It doesn't mean that we necessarily have a hearing on it. If somebody just was protesting saying, why aren't we doing plastic? We don't have to do things that don't make sense. But if it's something that is the same specifications, it could meet the same requirement. I will have it spelled out what having a hearing on that public hearing. But I want to make sure you guys have the information and the questions so that you guys are familiar and comfortable with findings for making this sole source, because it is anticipated, I believe, that this is going to be in excess of, I'm just going to say it because we don't want to go over specifics of what we think, but in excess of $150,000. So it does have that higher level of scrutiny of why we're not going out to bid or proposals.
Questions from the board?
Yeah, I have two questions. One is, besides the specs of the actual structure, is timeline also part of this? Like, you need this product delivered or available by a certain time?
Well, we do need it at a certain time, but I don't know that that actually plays into the sole source. Because we're actually getting started way early on this, because we knew that it was going to be a time-consuming process. The actual project itself will not happen until sometime mid to end of next summer. So we are roughly 9 or 10 months ahead of this thing. So I can't say that time actually is really
Okay.
a determining.
And then my second question is, what's the time? How much time does someone have to protest the sole source? Is this like 2 weeks or a week or?
It's legally under the OARs, it's 7 days.
Okay.
Some counties have actually done less than that, 5 days. But the current OAR say 7. I don't see, we don't have anything in our specific Lincoln County code for that. So I think the OARs would be fair to allow people to 7 days.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Commissioner Hunt?
I'll just make the observation that this construction seems to be well vetted from a legal standpoint. I see Mr. Blair's memo references several ORSs. Assistant County Counsel will be providing more. So certainly from a legal standpoint, it's been vetted, and look forward to that additional information. I do have one question, and it may be because I'm old and my eyes aren't very good, but I looked at the map, the last page. Where is this project on the map?
All right, so we are up, basically up the Alsea River.
Mhm.
So Highway 34.
Right.
Take a right onto Five Rivers Road. Approximately 10 miles up, Five Rivers is Buck Creek Road, County Road. So you take a right and head then back to the west on Buck Creek Road, and it's about a half a mile in Buck Creek.
So is that near Canal Creek Campground, Blackberry Campground?
You are way east of Canal Creek. Blackberry, you're still further, is Blackberry between Five Rivers and Buck Creek?
Here's the map I'm looking at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Blackberry is after
and
Canal Creek.
so, Yeah, we're kind of, well, the river does not run truly east. It runs south there. But if you go beyond Blackberry, you'll see, what's it listed as there? Like, 807. Yeah, County Road 807. My eyes deceive me.
There's an arrow that says project site to your left there of the screen.
Scroll up,
You
Casey.
kind of zoom out a
Yeah.
bit, you can see that arrow is pointing down to the location.
And I noticed the very tiny time to the right of the map saying that it's approximately 40 miles to Corvallis heading east. So if that
Okay.
helps
Yeah,
fix it in
it's
people's
basically
minds.
almost as far south and east as you can get in Lincoln County.
Mhm.
Thank you.
All right. So are we ready to give staff direction on this?
So I want to make sure, I don't know if the specifics have come out yet, but Mr. Kenyon, what is the size of this project?
The overall
The
value.
Oh, no,
The
no.
concrete?
Yes.
Size in as in quantity or dollar amount?
Not dollar amount. That's
Well-
still to be negotiated.
And just to be clear, 'cause that's one of the requirements for a sole source is that even though you have a sole source, you are still required legally to negotiate the contract to the best of your abilities with the sole source contractor. So that's why I don't want to go into
Yeah.
exact value, but
Yeah, these are very large pieces. When they're actually in place, it'll make the stream 24 feet wide and 11.5 feet tall. Well, it replaces basically a failing steel corrugated squash tube that is about half that size. And what these structures allow to happen is by removing this culvert, you open up the natural bottom of the stream, and it gives you then 1.5 times what the actual active channel width is. And so it's been calculated at 24 feet. And so it will allow for free flow even during 100-year flow events when, you know, it's actually critical to make sure the water's going under the road instead of over the road. But it also, in this area, there's limited access for salmon passage. And what this is really about for Mid-Coast Watershed Council is fish passage. What it's really about for Lincoln County Road Department is trying to replace a failing culvert. And so by agreeing to work with Mid-Coast Watershed Council, we're kind of killing two birds here with one stone. I mean, the road department is getting a brand new facility that is going to last for 100 years. Mid-Coast Watershed Council and the public is going to get basically a salmon passage project that's going to open up Cougar Creek to salmon spawning. So that's kind of the end game.
So definitely a win-win.
It's totally a win-win.
And Mr. Kenyon, sorry, Brian Gardner again, if I could ask another question. So we've kind of heard this, the span of this. Do you have an estimated weight for this structure?
I'll refer to my engineer for that.
I believe there are 11 tons per segment, and on the screen here, you can see a section of that. One section, and I believe there'll be the total length of segments is going to be 56 feet. So
So how many segments is it?
I think there'll be 11. They'll come over probably 2 days, 11 trucks. Will include wing walls and head walls, which are not shown on that particular photo.
So 11 tons per segment, 11 segments, 121 estimated tons.
Thereabouts, yes.
And that's why I wanted to discuss that the transport of this type of stuff, that does have to do with sole source. This is a lot of
Wait, yeah, to move around.
material
Yeah.
in a form.
They'll procure the segments at their fabrication facility, and they will store the segments until the contractor is ready to install.
Great.
Great.
Anything further from the board?
No, so does this, I do have a question. Does this come back
Sure.
then for a decision next week? Is that the,
Would you be able to draft findings in time
That's
for
what I
next
would
week's meeting?
suggest
Okay.
is
Okay.
having it come back before for the findings, because that again, our code doesn't specify exactly an order in which to do things, but I think it's there's an order that's kind of clear from the other requirements that the findings would happen if so made by the board. And then that's when notice could go out. And of course, that doesn't mean that there's a contract. The notice goes out, protest can be made, and if not, then we are required legally to negotiate the best contract we can with the sole source if that's allowed.
Okay,
So that's the order. So the next thing would be next week, I guess, for findings. And yes, I'll be able to do that.
Commissioner Hunt, did you have something more?
No, I'm okay with that. I will offer my apologies to Mr. Blair. Now I see on the left side where it says project site, and you have quite clearly identified where it is once I found it. So that provided the information. The other thing is I appreciate Director Kenyon's comment about killing two birds, but maybe we catch a couple of salmon.
or not?
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's the point. maybe.
This year would be before now.
Yeah.
Okay,
Uh-huh.
so we have direction to staff. Thank you,
We
gentlemen.
didn't have to
all.
keep them. We could catch
There
them
you
and
go.
release.
Okay, catch and release. Yeah.
Very good.
Right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We'll bring this back next week. And Mr. Gardner, you get to stay up here because you've got the next item, correct?
This is actually Mr. Rodriguez, which I don't know if he's been introduced to you all, but I am just helping with this.
I think not formally, but informally.
So this is John Rodriguez, our building official for Lincoln County.
Good morning.
Nice to
Welcome.
meet you. Yeah.
But I am remaining, for the record, Brian Gardner, Assistant County Counsel.
And for the record, I'm John Rodriguez, building official for your Lincoln County.
Okay, the floor is yours.
I will do just a brief introduction, and then Mr. Rodriguez will explain or answer questions as to this. This is regarding a first reading for updating Chapter 3 of the Lincoln County Code, or Building Code. And the update would be to more clearly define the role of building official, not just the authority, but also the responsibilities for the building official. And to specifically adopt all of the state specialty codes that are listed. Whereas prior it was just the electrical code that was specifically listed. It more clearly defines permit requirements for when permits are required, and powers for the building official to enforce those. It also has violation enforcement and civil penalties for violation of those rules, and more clearly defines an appellate process for rights and procedures for property owners.
Okay, before we get too far, since this is a first reading, don't we need to do the usual board direction to read the ordinance in full or by title only?
Yes, we're requesting by title only, and then of course we'll be available for questions as to specific time, but there were a lot of changes.
Is the board agreeable to reading the ordinance by title only?
Yeah. Okay with that.
Commissioner Hunt?
That's fine with me.
Okay. So,
Do you want Mr. Rodriguez to do that, or?
or I could do it as chair. Relating to Chapter 3, Lincoln County Building Code adoption of state and specialty codes, powers and duties of building official, permits and standards, violation enforcement, and civil penalties, appeals. All right, the floor is yours again.
As you're aware, this is just an amendment to your original building code ordinance. Found out that a lot of your ordinance that you had for the building code department was really lacking. It was only like a 2-page, just an introduction to the electrical code program only, and then a slight duty of the building official. And as you're aware now, there's a lot more to that that was on your original ordinance. And then we're also keeping the erosion control
Yeah, so
under this same ordinance. We're not changing any that out of it. But the main thing is just to get the state has required the local jurisdictions to either adopt several different items that they dropped off of the state building code. One was a stop work order for building without permits. So under your older ordinances, there was no stop work order for anything like that here. So my hands were tied. I can't do anything if one of my inspectors or myself or anybody saw or called in for illegal building. So now that if you adopt this, then we'll have the capabilities to do that. I can issue stop work orders to somebody that's doing illegal construction. And then it gives the authority for myself to, if I see something in a building or something being built illegally, I have the capability just to go in and introduce myself and let them know that they're doing something illegal besides it being an obvious. So there was no, right now, you didn't have the capabilities of just to walk in and say, introduce myself and I need you to stop what you're doing here. Or if there was something dangerous in a dangerous building, we didn't have that also in our ordinance. So that's the reason I made this amendments.
This makes a lot of sense to me. Questions?
No questions from me.
Commissioner Hunt?
No, I think this is another example of updating some of our codes and ordinances, and I sense it's probably long overdue. So
Mhm.
also,
Sorry.
well, I was just going to say, it's good to see you again, John. I
Thank you,
Mhm.
Commissioner.
Mhm.
think you come to us with great credentials, and imagine the drive's a little shorter for you now than it used to be when you were driving from Umatilla to Hood River, if I remember correctly.
Well, Umatilla to Dallas, yes.
Yeah,
it's a
the
little-
Dallas, not
yeah.
Hood River. Yep. Okay, anyhow, welcome.
Thank you.
So just briefly, I wanted
Yes.
to point out, and this is Brian Gardner, us, County Council, Ewell, and Mr. Rodriguez's staff, we worked together on this. Vast majority of the work happening from Mr. Rodriguez and his staff, so presenting things that they saw as speed bumps to doing what what we want them to do.
Mhm.
So I worked with seeing where the holes were in our code, pointing it out to us, and we worked out the language to get that up to legal specifications. And it's always been clear from our building official and staff that these changes were to increase the safety and the value of Lincoln County structures for our citizens and all of our visitors.
Indeed. So we've completed first reading. What's the next step?
Well, so we did that first reading. We need to have it set for, at least 13 days out, which would be November 2nd, I think, is that meeting, 14 days out.
Okay. Is that agreeable with the commissioners?
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. We will see you
Good work.
again at that point. Thank you very much. Good
Thank
work.
you.
Thank you.
Okay, we move to commissioner reports, and although this is going to be the first wildfire report from Commissioner Jacobson in a while, it's certainly, I know from my vantage point at least, it seems like the recovery work is continuing to progress steadily. So please bring us up to date.
Yeah, so I just have several smattering of updates. So it's been 2 years since we had the Echo Mountain fire in September of 2020, which destroyed about 300 homes. Over half of the homes that were lost or damaged are somewhere in the process of being replaced. So there's permits with county planning somewhere in the process. And many of those homes are actually back in place with people living in them. So we've had some huge efforts with recovery in terms of housing, not completely there yet, but doing really well. I think, as you recall, all three of us fought very hard to get the FEMA direct housing mission, which was set up in the parking lot of the Chinook Winds Casino Resort. And that is now winding down. So many of those trailers have actually been taken out and the families are moving on. FEMA support in general at this point, 2 years out, has really been waning. People remaining in those FEMA trailers have been paying rent for quite some time, actually. The disaster case manager program, which has been funded through the state, is sadly ending for now. The idea is that when more money comes in through the federal government, through the community development block grant, that program would be restarted. But at this point in time, I think at the end of this month, there will be no disaster case managers in Lincoln County, which is not ideal, frankly. On a more positive note, there was some funding we were able to secure this year, and we were able to send all kids that wanted to go. It was not forced, but all kids that wanted to go got to go to trauma-informed summer camp this year. Of course, we didn't call it trauma-informed summer camp because that doesn't sound like a lot of fun. So we called it something else, but that is what it was. And we used a national curriculum around kids that have been through disasters and how to have camp around that topic. So really great. We had several local kids that participated in that. We're also really, really, really close to restarting our septic and well program for survivors. This is $3 million we have coming in right now, and another $1 million that we're working on the contract for. That $3 million, we actually have the contracts here in Lincoln County, and then we have to work, which we're doing right now, working on getting a contract with OSU Extension Service that will really be doing the outreach and the grants management for us on this program. So my hope is here really soon we'll be able to actually start working on our backlogged applications that we have for this program and begin to be able to replace and repair and inspect both septic and well issues in the county with people that went through the fire. We also have technical assistance that we received for both water and for housing. Both of those projects are underway. So our technical assistance is water is looking at the kind of metropolis of Otis area and kind of coming up with a water plan for that area. And then our housing technical assistance is really focusing on strategies for workforce housing, not low income housing, because that's a pretty clear path, but working on what are the strategies for communities of our size to get more workforce housing projects. Both of those should be wrapped up by the end of the year. We also, and I think we've talked about this previously, but we also just received notice from Oregon Housing and Community Services that we will be receiving, Lincoln County will be receiving $2 million as a direct fund from them for us to do some land banking. So thank you, Commissioner Hall, for your work on that on OCHS. We do not yet have a contract for that, so I am pushing very hard to get that, as the money or most of the money needs to be spent out by the end of this fiscal year. So it will be a little bit of a scramble in doing that. So as soon as we have the contract, we'll be looking at probably mostly single lots or R2 lots that we could buy, save, and wait till the larger community development block grant the state has applied for from the federal government comes in, and then those sites would be developed for wildfire survivors. But the concern that I have had over the last 2 years, especially as the state has been working on receiving this large federal funding package, is that we get the federal funding package, you only have so long to spend it out. Property and real estate here is very competitive and very hard to find. So we may not be able to build that many houses if we only have 2 years to do it, because finding the property is very difficult. So I think this money for land banking is really critical. The other thing I was going to say is yesterday I got a call from my friends at Lane County who believe they have found some money hiding with the e-board for disaster recovery and resilience. And so they are working on behalf of all the counties that went through the 2020 wildfires to put together a funding ask for that money, which has to be spent out by the end of this fiscal year. So I'm working on putting together that request today by 5 o'clock. To carry forward, and just a thanks to all the department heads and people that have helped and been with me and scrambling alongside me to get that funding request in.
Great.
And that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, this makes me think back to talking to an emergency management expert not long after the fire had been extinguished, said, get ready because recovery is a 2 to 10-year process from an event like this. And 2 years in, I think this is remarkable progress, but also still a long ways to go.
Yep, well said.
Commissioner
I
Hunt,
would agree with that observation.
you have anything to report today?
Oh, do I have anything to report?
Yeah.
Actually, I have a couple of things.
Okay.
Both of these are relative to tomorrow. First of all, I will be attending the economic summit that will be held, I believe, at the Best Western Agate Beach for most of the day. And the other event tomorrow, I will wish my wife happy anniversary for 43 years she's put up with me.
Congratulations. Let's see. Trying to think if there's anything I could share. Well, I and some other members of our House Bill 4123 Homeless Planning and Coordination Steering Committee are now in the process of reviewing the 6 applications we received from consultants to develop our comprehensive 5-year homeless strategy plan. And the ones I've been through so far, extremely impressive to me. I mean, we did a local homeless plan in 2007, did an update 5 years later. And I think we produced very useful plans, and many projects proposed in those plans were realized. But having the kind of high-powered expertise and resources that these firms can bring to the table, I'm truly excited, because I think the timing is just really important, that now has the resources for homeless services and housing are continuing to grow from the state after growing significantly the last few years. You know, a plan by itself is worthless, but if it's a springboard to accomplishing other things, then it's very valuable. And I think this is the right opportunity for us at the right time.
Wonderful.
Okay, we don't have an executive session today. Public comment. We did not receive any written public comment. Do we have anybody on Zoom who wishes to offer up to 3 minutes of public comment? If so, please use the raise hand function on Zoom. And Mr. Miller, do we have anybody signed in? Okay. No hands raised, so I'll mention that next Monday, October 24th, 9 a.m. It says we usually do these at 10. So can we double check that? Our office staff meeting and board briefing. And then the regular board meeting, Wednesday, October 26th, also here in this room, both public access live and over the Zoom platform. So,
Chair, yeah, and both of those start times are incorrect.
okay, so they should be 10 o'clock for both. Okay, glad that's cleared up. So until next week, we're in adjournment.